Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Ha! How you doing, everybody? Nick DiVirgilio here. Welcome back to Groovy Thursdays. We made it to groove number 29, and this one is pretty darn cool. The song is Shake Your Body Down to the Ground from the Jacksons, and the original drummer is Ed Greene. And for a simple pop tune, this groove is not that easy to play. We'll get into that in just a second. This song is also extra special because this coming Saturday, my daughter Sophia is getting married, which is a really cool thing. And it's a whole 70s themed wedding, 70s themed music, all kinds of stuff like that. We put a little band together. We're going to play a dance set, Marcus Scott singing, which is going to be awesome. And this is one of the tunes in the set. And it inspired me to put it in Groovy Thursdays here because, again, this is a pretty interesting drum groove. So with that, let's get into groove number 29. Shake your body down to the ground. Let's have some fun. The groove's in 4/4 time at 120 BPM, and it's just a bar long. So if you do end up playing this song with a band or you just practice at home, playing this particular groove that we're going to get into for the whole length of the tune is actually kind of hard. What I did in my demonstration at the beginning of the video was, for 4 bars, I played just the skeleton of the groove, kick, snare, hat. Then for 4 bars, I added the rack tom. Then for another 4 bars, I added the floor tom along with the rack tom. And then for 8 bars, I played the whole groove all together. What makes this drum groove difficult to play is that it's actually 3 parts layered on top of each other. You have the main kick, snare, and hat part. Then you have an overdubbed tom part with your floor tom and your rack tom. And then there's an overdubbed hi-hat part. So as one person, you have to play the parts of 3 people. One quick thing to mention here before we get into the groove and the details of this groove is to talk about the drummer who played on this song, Ed Greene. If you don't know who Ed Greene is, you should definitely check him out. He's a long-time session drummer, amazing musician, and his resume, his CV, is a mile long. He played for so many artists. He was one of those classic LA session musicians that just was gigging all the time, in studios every day. So he played with the Jacksons, he played with Barry White, he played with Steely Dan, he played with just all kinds of people, and that's just to name a few. If you just look him up on Wikipedia, you could see how long his list is. And he's a groove master. You could see why he got hired by producers and artists all the time, because he could lay down grooves that just fat pocket and great backbeat and just classic session drumming. Being that good and being able to lay down beats like this, being really versatile, is what made Ed Greene a first call session musician for so many producers and artists. And if you want to be a session musician, have that versatility, and be in the studio all the time, Ed Greene is a great person to model. All right, now let's get into this groove. So again, in my demonstration, I built the groove up over 12 bars to get into the whole kit and caboodle there. So the first 4 bars, again, it's just the skeleton of the groove, 8th notes in the hi-hat, snare drum on 2 and 4, and kick drum. Kick drum is important here on beat 1, and then you have the last 16th note of beat 2, and then right on beat 3. So you have a double, a nice solid kick double. Da-doom, da-doom, da-doom. Those are always fun to practice, and if you can get those nice and solid, it's a cool thing to add to any drum groove. So that's what's going on in those first 4 bars. Nice and solid. Now when you listen to the Jacksons tune and the song kicks in, you have the main kick and snare part with the tom overdub. And that's what I'm building up to in these next 8 bars here. So second 4 bars, I add the rack tom. Everything else is the same. Again, hi-hats are just 8th notes, 2 and 4 on the snare drum. The kick pattern is still the same with that double, except you're gonna add a rack tom hit on 3 and right before the second snare drum on beat 4. Puka, puka, 1, 2, 3, and kapow, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and And it's a cool momentum builder, just that single rack tom hit, because of where it's laying on the last 16th note of beat 3, right before your backbeat on 4. Now in these last 4 bars before the main groove, I add in the floor tom, and this is where the difficulty is starting to happen, because as a traditional player where I'm right-handed, my hi-hat hand is crossed over the top of my snare hand, I have this crossing over happening. To reach the floor tom and keep the 8th notes going, I have to go under like this. If you're an open-handed player, this might be a lot easier for you to do because you're already spread out. You can reach your rack tom and your floor tom easy like this. But if you play normally, or more traditionally, I should say, it starts to get a little bit hard because you've got to keep the hi-hat going. The 8th note's got to keep driving. Another thing about adding the floor tom here is that it's also on the last 16th note. This time it's on the last 16th note of beat 2, right before the kick drum on 3. So you have these momentum builders on 2E and then on 3E and 2E and with the floor tom, 3E and with the rack tom. I'm going to vocalize this real quick for you. Clap the pulse and just do the kick and snare part. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom, ka, boom, poo, ka, boom, ka, boom, poo, ka. 1, 2 E and a 3, a 4. 1, 2 E and a 3, a 4. I always suggest you vocalize grooves, simple or hard, because when you vocalize it, you internalize the rhythm. When you feel it here, comes out of your mouth, it'll translate to your hands and your feet easier. One thing I would suggest if you're playing this groove for the very first time is just to do the kick and snare part over and over again and get that coordination down of the floor tom and the rack tom coming before the kick drum and right before the snare drum. All right, now we're to the main groove with everything going on. Everything's the same. Kick and snare do the same thing with the floor tom and the rack tom. Your hi-hat still plays eighth notes, except you gotta add some stabs in the hi-hat at the beginning of the bar. The stabs come in on 1E, second 16th note of beat 1, and then right on beat 2. What's hard about this is you still have to keep the eighth note, like the driving eighth note, solid while you're adding this. So you go 1E and a 2 and 3 and 4 and 1E and a 2 and 3 and 4 and it has to be groovy. It has to feel good. I don't know how he played this in the studio, Ed Greene I'm talking about here. He could have done it two-handed, like that, or maybe he just did it with one hand, but the fact is that he wasn't playing the rest of the drums. He was just doing the hi-hat overdub. Same with the toms. The tom, floor tom, and rack tom were overdubbed on top of just the main kick and snare. So it's difficult because you want to keep the driving groove happening, even though you're adding this little couple of stabs here on 1E and 2. Another way to think about this hi-hat part is that you have 2 quick doubles and then the rest is just eighth notes. So if I'm clapping the pulse like this, the doubles sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1E, a 2, 3, 4. 1E, a 2, 3, 4. But you have to keep eighth notes after the doubles in your right hand. So it's like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1E, a 2, and 3, and 4, and 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 like that, clapping it through makes it sound real stiff and just kind of like almost like a rudiment sort of thing. The key is making it groovy and slinky and fat and backbeat and all of those kinds of things on top of everything else you're playing. Another thing that makes it even difficult is while you're doing that, you have to cross under. Well, for me at least, you have to cross under and hit the floor tom and then get to the rack tom. So you don't have time to think about all this because it's only a bar long. It just keeps repeating. There's no setup. There's no way to relax to think about it. It's going to come 4 bars down the line. It's just happening bar after bar. So the coordination factor is pretty difficult and you don't have time to think. You just kind of got to get it in your bones and in your hands and feet, get the coordination down and just play it. One thing you'll notice in my transcription is that I added a couple of ghost notes in my left hand and my snare hand and even a double in the hi-hat. It just felt sort of natural to do that once you get the whole coordination thing down and the whole thing going together. But adding those couple little ghost notes and the double on the hi-hat kind of turned it into a 2-bar phrase and made it a little bit easier to get back around to the 1 and keep the flow going. So see if it works for you. And that's basically it. A super cool and funky drum groove. The song is Shake Your Body Down to the Ground from the Jacksons record Destiny, the original drummer, Ed Greene. And even if you're not into this kind of music totally, this is a great drum groove to learn because it's got so much going on. It's got coordination. You're playing 3 parts as one person. It's got pocket, it's got backbeat, and it's just super fun to play. Definitely encourage you to check it out. If you like what's going on here at Groovy Thursdays, I ask that you like this video, share it with all your friends, subscribe to the channel, bring on the comments and suggestions for future grooves, and join me next week. We made it to groove number 30, everybody. Have a great week. My daughter's getting married on Saturday. That's pretty cool. We'll see you guys next week for groove number 30. Cheers, everybody.